Hello and welcome to Latitude, a new weekly show at Frontline on India's engagement with the world and global geopolitics. It's been 2 weeks since the horrific attack on tourists at Pahalgam in Kashmir. India has said that the two of the attackers came from Pakistan across the border. Indian security agencies have said that the attack was carried out by a group called the Resistance Force, which India says is a proxy of the Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Toiba, an internationally designated terrorist group, and which itself is said to be a proxy of the Pakistan Army. In the last 15 days, India has taken several steps against Pakistan, including keeping the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. A military escalation is widely anticipated, but has not yet taken place. Meanwhile, the ceasefire, the line of control, is taking a beating. With me to discuss all this is TCA Raghavan, India's former High Commissioner to Pakistan. He's also a historian and an accomplished writer. Since retiring from the Indian Foreign Service, he has authored 4 books, among them one on Pakistan called The People Next Door, The Curious History of India's Relations with Pakistan. Welcome to Frontline, Mr. Raghavan.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I will start by asking the question that is on everyone's minds. Is there going to be a war between India and Pakistan? Or to put it slightly differently, is India going to launch a military response of some kind to the terrorist attack at Baisarand?
Well, I have no information as such. My own guess is that some tactical military operation will certainly take place because there is a certain public expectation that some punitive action be taken given the scale of the outrage which took place in Pahalgam. But to my mind, this step will be tactical because the major strategic step which India has already taken was keeping the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. This is possibly the most powerful sanction which could have been employed, and for the first time ever, notwithstanding numerous Pakistani provocations in the past, this time around, this very, very powerful sanction or very, very powerful instrument has in fact been deployed. So in my personal opinion, the major action which had to be taken has already been taken. And although it was not registered as such, it is an accomplished fact. What will follow will be, I think, more tactical to demonstrate a certain punitive capacity.
So why do you say that the Indus Waters Treaty, or keeping it in abeyance, was the most powerful action that India could have taken? After all, the water is not going to stop immediately flowing to Pakistan. So what in your mind is so powerful about this?
I think the fact of Pakistan being a lower riparian to a country with which it has a deeply adversarial relationship weighs far more in the Pakistani strategic mind than we in India understand. So I think that this step is not simply symbolic. And while it is true that you do not have sufficient capacities to make an immediate difference as far as river water flows are concerned, or in fact, perhaps there'll never be a time when you will have sufficient capacities to stop river waters, because if you see the Chenab or the Jhelum or the Indus, when you realize that you're talking then about stopping these rivers, you're talking about capacities which nobody has ever envisaged. But I think the political act of keeping this treaty in abeyance conveys a signal to the Pakistani mind, which nothing else that you could have done would have matched up to in terms of the impact it has had. That at least is my reading of the situation.
When you speak about the impact on the Pakistani mind, what exactly is that? Can you break it down?
You see, Pakistan has always had a deep vulnerability about its water security. In many ways, when people talk about Kashmir in Pakistan, they're not referring to it only on account of religious affinity or on account of historical factors, or because territorially they feel that Kashmir should be part of Pakistan and that is an unfinished agenda of partition. They also refer, Kashmir has that deep place in the Pakistani mind because it is intimately related to its water security. And they feel that unless they have some kind of territorial control or territorial oversight over Kashmir, that water security will never be addressed. The Indus Waters Treaty was an effort when it was signed to address that deeply felt insecurity in a lower riparian country. By keeping that treaty in abeyance, I think it's a very, very powerful political and strategic message which has been sent that the kind of behavior that Pakistan has been tolerating or letting pass with a nod and a wink can no longer continue like this forever.
So, for that very reason, I mean, because it affects people across the border very deeply, is this even a justified step? Because there are humanitarian consequences of this. Stopping the water will affect the crops across the border. It will lead to water shortages, and all the humanitarian consequences that will follow. So, is that a justified step?
You see, on this, there is no factual answer. It depends on what point of view you have. Well, how do you deal with a neighbor as recalcitrant as Pakistan? The fact is, numerous efforts have been made to have some kind of a more stable relationship, but those efforts have failed. Now, how do you send a message that certain kinds of provocations will just not be accepted? And public opinion is deeply outraged by this. So the question is, what is the message which would have worked? In my way, keeping the Indus Waters Treaty, because of all those potential consequences, but I underline the fact that those consequences are still potential and will remain so for a long time. But keeping that treaty in abeyance certainly does underline the seriousness with which and the outrage with which these kind of terrorist steps are regarded in India.
And with regard to India's own status as a lower riparian or middle riparian on the Brahmaputra with regard to China, or with regard to India's international reputation as a sovereign guarantor of treaties with other countries, do you think this affects that in a way that could have consequences for us later?
I think at this stage it is difficult to say that. I don't see it as necessarily affecting us, but I don't rule it out either. But one must accept and recognize that in dealing with Pakistan, you're always choosing from a menu of bad options. And given the current state, that the state of the India-Pakistan relationship as it existed prior to Pahalgam, it's not very clear what other diplomatic options from that menu of bad options could have been exercised to convey the sense of outrage which has been felt in India. So yes, this step may have consequences. One cannot precisely predict that, but any step has consequences, and certainly major steps always have consequences. So if you see in the past when there were similar terrorist attacks, it's not as if steps were taken which did not have any consequences. Each of those steps had certain consequences. But as I said at the beginning, we are choosing from a menu of bad options, because when you have bad neighborhood relations and you have as deeply adversarial a relationship as you have with Pakistan, nobody is going to escape from this without any consequences.
There is also the argument that it's going to punish the people, this kind of action, even though you say that the consequences are not apparent yet. It seems like India is punishing all of Pakistan, the Pakistani people, for the actions perhaps for which the Pakistani state is responsible or the Pakistani army is responsible. How would you respond to that? I mean, it is the same argument against sanctions as well, right? That sanctions hurt the people more than the rulers of that particular country against whom it is really aimed. Say, for instance, Iran.
Well, there's no answer to that logic, because how do you draw a distinction between a state and the people? I mean, there are no smart sanctions which have been designed anywhere in the world, and certainly in the India-Pakistan context, because you had a relationship which was hollowed out. There's no smart sanction which you can target precisely at elements of the state and exclude any collateral consequences altogether. It's not feasible. It doesn't work like that in real life. So as I said, you are choosing from a menu of bad options. I see the point about harming the people, harming agriculture, humanitarian consequences. All of those are valid. But in the end, when you're dealing with a recalcitrant neighbor, your choice is limited always to a menu of bad options. And at some point of time, the choice has to be exercised.
You said a little while earlier that many efforts to actually salvage this relationship have failed in the past, diplomatically salvage this relationship. So can you say how they have failed and why they failed?
Well, I was personally witness to two major failures. The most prominent of which was after the Mumbai terrorist attack in 2008. And it was a long drawn-out failure. It was not as if there was one decision taken by the government of Pakistan and that led to, that error of judgment led to a failure, led to the larger failure in the relationship. No, it was a failure which stretched on from about 2009, 2010 till about 2017. And I think that the consequences of that failure can be traced directly, from the consequences of that failure, there's a linear path down to the current crisis situation which exists between India and Pakistan. After the Mumbai terrorist attack, a huge amount of information and intelligence was shared with Pakistan to enable them to work on that evidence, on that intelligence and information, and convert it into legal evidence to build up a convictable case against the conspirators of that terrorist attack. And from 2009 onwards, we saw some efforts by a team of dedicated Pakistani police officers and legal prosecutors with some support from the government to build up that convictable case. And like all cases, that case was proceeding at snail's pace, which was frustrating. But it was nevertheless, you could see that there was a process in place. And a lot of us hoped that that process would gather traction and finally lead to an outcome which would have a very, very positive long-term impact on the India-Pakistan relationship. From 2014 onwards, we saw that process slowly grind to a halt and then disintegrate. And that was primarily because a certain defensive mindset came to the fore in Pakistan, which felt that acting on information and intelligence given by India on a terrorist act committed against India was somehow less than patriotic. And it also got tied up with the internal civil-military tussle in Pakistan underway from 2014 onward. So what happened was that the Mumbai case spluttered into zero by 2017. And I think it had a lasting and very powerful damaging impact on India-Pakistan relations, because it remains, Mumbai remains hovering in the background as that unresolved issue until, as such time, some steps are taken to close that issue. I don't think relations can be expected to acquire features of stability. All the discussion we hear in Pakistan today that India has jumped to accuse us, and this is default position of India to put coercive pressure on Pakistan. There's no evidence. None of that would be applied to Mumbai, because this was information and intelligence which was shared quite quickly. And I must say, a great deal of information was also gathered in Pakistan itself. There was a process underway to convert that intelligence and information into legal evidence. But that whole thing came to zero. So I would see it as one great failure, the consequences of which we are still living with today. There have been other such failures, not so long drawn out. You could look at Kargil as one example of that. You could see 2006 onwards, as the domestic political situation changed in Pakistan, as to how the composite dialogue process came under pressure. So there are other examples also.
But you spoke of something, another episode to which you were personally witness. You said there were two. You spoke of one, which was the Mumbai attack. What was the other?
The other, of course, was a sustained effort which was made in the second half of 2015 and which culminated in December 2015 with a meeting between the NSAs of India and Pakistan in Bangkok, the visit of the External Affairs Minister to Islamabad, and finally the Prime Minister of India's brief visit to Lahore, a symbolic visit to Lahore in end 2015. Now, that was a sustained diplomatic effort to give a political push to a relationship which was spluttering. And that too, as we all know, ended in failure, primarily because of the absence of any consensus in Pakistan on how to move ahead with this at a time of heightened civil-military contestation.
And that actually was followed by the attack on the Pathankot Air Base. And in that year, there was the Uri attack as well, and several in between. And of course, the Uri attack led to what we call, what Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the army call the surgical strike on across the border.
Yes, absolutely.
So, you spoke about evidence and the role of evidence in this kind of incident, and how India actually provided so much evidence in the after the Mumbai attack. Do you think that in this attack, when the government is planning or said to be planning a military response, there is a requirement for evidence to actually link this attack to the Pakistani state before you actually launch that military response against Pakistan? Is that why we are still waiting to see that kind of military response?
I don't know the answer to that because, frankly, it's something which you can come to you can provide an answer with only if you have some factual evidence. I have no factual evidence with regard to that. But I will say that the demand for evidence, in the aftermath of major terrorist attacks is often also a red herring. Because often to convert intelligence and information into evidence, there's a legal process involved. And that legal process requires both countries, in this case India and Pakistan, to work together, as was the effort in the aftermath of a Mumbai terrorist attack. I don't see any possibilities of such a joint effort in the present situation.
Why not?
Because your entire history militates against that kind of assumption, and B, there is enough impressionistic analytical suggestions that in this kind of attack, the hand of the Pakistani state, in the widest possible sense, is very evident and visible. So I would say that I'm sure there are efforts being made to gather evidence, because in the aftermath of any terrorist attack, the international audience also has to be addressed. And I'm sure some evidence may have already been provided. But I also feel that this evidence issue can take you off into a side track. And that perhaps I'm speaking more because of my own experience of handling the evidence and presenting it, and then trying to see whether the Pakistanis would work on it. And that experience was not in the end, it did not end in a positive result.
We also saw after the Pathankot attack an attempt at a joint investigation.
That's right.
A team visited the Pathankot airbase from Pakistan. There were ISI personnel in that team. There were diplomats. There were, I think, others as well, army people. How did that go? What happened to it after that visit?
Basically, the Pakistanis refused to play ball. You see, the idea, it was not a new idea. What your question you're asking, why not? Why can't you do this jointly? It's been attempted before a number of times. In the aftermath of Pathankot, that was one example where it was something which had never been agreed to earlier, that you allow a Pakistani security team and come and inspect the site of the terrorist attack, but this time it was allowed.
And that too, it was a military installation.
It was an Air Force base, yes. Yeah. And the expectation was that would lead to a process. There would be a return visit by India, and that process which I spoke about, information and intelligence being shared so that the other side can work on it and convert it into evidence which you can build up a convictable case with. That process ground to a halt because Pakistan refused to play ball. The same effort had been made after a series of terrorist attacks in 2005, when a joint anti-terror mechanism had been set up. And then also the effort was that you work with Pakistan, you share evidence, you share information, and you share intelligence, and then the other side would work on it, and you would jointly then build up a case. And the idea was you put in place some kind of joint process, because process is, in the end, the most important thing in India-Pakistan relations. But that too, after about 2 years, we all came to the conclusion, even those of us who were the most optimistic, that this whole thing is a bit of a farce, because the Pakistanis were basically, tootling the ball in midfield and making no real effort to address our real concerns.
Right. In response to the India's step of keeping the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance, Pakistan has suspended the Shimla agreement. What does this actually mean in effect? And what does this mean specifically for the line of control which came into existence with this agreement? Earlier, it was called the ceasefire line, and it was in 1972 with the Shimla agreement that we started calling it the line of control. What does it mean for that?
I don't think it means anything. I think Pakistan had to do something in a tit-for-tat way to show that they were pushing back, because in the end, this is as much on both sides. It's as much to show to your domestic audiences that I'm standing up and I'm doing whatever is required. So they had to find something which would have the same kind of symbolic force as the Indus Waters Treaty. So they thought of the Shimla agreement. Now, what it means in practical terms is very difficult to say. Does it mean that Pakistan will now no longer work with India bilaterally with regard to Kashmir? You can say it never has, because it's always raised the issue in the UN and elsewhere and at every conceivable opportunity. Does it mean that the LOC, the ceasefire line now comes back as the accepted terminology? Well, does it mean that the Pakistanis can now say that you cannot use Shimla as a talking point when we raise the matter in multilateral fora? Well, Shimla has never stopped Pakistan from raising the issue at in multilateral fora. So I'd see it just as a public posture to push back rather than the step having any serious impact.
So I'm just wondering if that is a reason why also you're seeing a lot of tensions on the line of control. There have been firing incidents every day, and India is saying that Pakistan is trying to provoke the Indian military to respond. So I'm wondering if that is a fallout of this.
No, the LOC getting hot is always the consequence of a downside in India-Pakistan relations. Whenever there is a sharp dip, the immediate impact of that is felt on the line of control and on the ceasefire on the line of control. Now, in Pakistan, when I saw their newspapers last, they were full of reports that India is carrying out all the ceasefire violations. In India, it's the opposite point of view. It doesn't really matter. These ceasefire violations are always tactical in nature. You can never get to the bottom of who started it and when. But every time there is a serious dip in India-Pakistan relations, the impact of that is immediately and first felt on the LOC.
And by itself, they don't really have the potential to blow up into something more serious. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what when I say they are largely tactical, that's what I meant.
Talking about diplomatic efforts, one of the most important diplomatic efforts was the 4-point solution, as it is called, to Kashmir. And there was apparently a white paper. And this is now denied by Pakistan, a white paper on Kashmir where it was written down step by step how this whole issue of Kashmir between the two sides could be resolved. Can you throw some light on this? People have written extensively on it, but there doesn't seem to be a kind of conclusive, a conclusion to it, to say that it was there or it wasn't there. Because the Pakistani side says there was no white paper.
You see, the details are not important because, it's history now. But the point is that there is no one single formula which will solve the Kashmir dispute. There's no magic bullet. So people who think that the 4-point formula is some kind of a magic bullet which we can still resurrect, that view is wrong. What was being attempted was an effort to start a process across the line of control, which would replicate what was happening across the IB. And that is have more trade, have more confidence building measures, encourage more tourist traffic, encourage more contacts between civil society, business, political contacts, and so on. In other words, make the LOC more porous, just like you were making the IB more navigable, easier to transit through, with the expectation that over a period of time, this entire process would stabilize relations. Now, if you look at it from a purist point of view, that this is a solution to the Kashmir problem, it is not. because there's no solution to the Kashmir problem when K in Pakistan stands for Kashmir, and in India we know that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. So there's no solution as such. But what you were trying to do was put in place a process of improving relations and hoping that that would stabilize the relationship for a sufficient period of time. And after that, you can think of normalization. So now that process, of course, ground to a halt in real terms by 2007, 2008, and in in symbolic terms by 2013, 2014. In the sense it continued, but it had lost its potency because of, again, domestic change and domestic turmoil in Pakistan. I don't think there's any easy way of resurrecting that without some kind of seeing eye to eye on fundamental issues first between India and Pakistan. And I think step one has to be that you can't go around shooting up domestic tourists or innocent tourists.
Or anyone for that matter.
Or anyone for that matter.
Yeah. So this, you've written extensively on this, and it is also in your book on Pakistan, which is, as I said, The People Next Door, that India-Pakistan relations actually have to be seen in cycles, that there's a cycle of great tension, and then there is some attempt at solving things diplomatically. And these are cycles that have recurred and they're regular. So how do we see the present now? Is this part of a cycle, or is this a dead end, or will things pick up from here? What are we actually looking at now?
It's very difficult to say. I was writing a history book. It's called The Curious History. So historically, there is a cycle.
Yeah.
But it is also true that since 2017, there has been no cycle, but instead a linear process downwards. There have been breaks in that linear process, such as you had because of the opening up of the Kartarpur Sahib corridor or the ceasefire, on the reaffirmation of the ceasefire. But on the whole, it has been a downward slide, and some kind of low stability was reached after 2021 with the LOC ceasefire, but you did not see the resumption of a cycle. And that is certainly something which is a break from the past, because in the past there has been a cyclical movement. This time there is not. Whether we have moved into a phase where cycles will continue, but they will be over a much longer time frame, or we are in a phase where there is not going to be any cycles and you're going to remain at this very, very low kind of point in political and military and other terms, that's very difficult to say. I think in the midst of a crisis, to look too far ahead is not easy.
Let me just take you now to Pakistan, of which you're also a very great student. You're a keen observer of what's going on next door. How does this attack, how has it impacted the politics of Pakistan? How has it impacted the leadership of General Asim Munir, the army chief? I say the leadership of Asim Munir because he is the leader of the Pakistan army, as well as in a sense, the country now, because he's the person effectively calling the shots. So how do you see this particular attack and India's response to it having affected that?
Well, as after every terrorist attack or during every India-Pakistan crisis, the political spectrum in Pakistan has consolidated. They have consolidated against this traditional adversary or traditional foe. And to a great extent, as in the past, the consolidation is also around the military. So I would say that it has strengthened the position of the military and of the Chief of Army Staff. But that is not something to be surprised about. That is inevitable. Because whenever there is a crisis situation in India-Pakistan relations, that happens. So I don't see it as something to be very surprised about. This consolidation of political opinion was inevitable.
So does this mean then that the popularity that we saw for Imran Khan, that huge surge in his appeal for Pakistanis, which was actually also pitted as Imran Khan against the military, is that whole dynamic over now?
No, it's not over. It's been put aside for the moment, but it's not over by any means. It's very much like in India. You have, by and large, an all-party consensus that the government should take some action against this. And this kind of outrage is unacceptable. And most people agree with that view, which is not to say that, politics is over or differences don't exist or other dynamics are now totally forgotten. No, they are put aside because this thing has moved to the center of the radar. But those issues are there. And I think the structural fault lines in Pakistan between the military and the politicians, and the latest instance of that in the form of Imran Khan's politics, all of those are there. But they have been temporarily put aside and are no longer in the center of the radar. But it's temporary. It's not to say that it's over.
So is there an opportunity here for India, in Pakistan's multi-crisis? One is, of course, the political crisis, which, as you say, has not gone away. It's been shelved for the moment. But there's also the economic crisis. Is there an opportunity here for India to bring international pressure on Pakistan to do the right thing now after this attack, to kind of rally international opinion and against Pakistan, especially because of its economic troubles? And is India doing that already?
I'm sure India is doing that already, but we should be pretty clinical in our assessment of how it will work. I think the Indian position, there is a wide sympathy for it all across the world. But at the same time, Pakistan is a country of 250 million people. It has nuclear weapons. So regardless of what may be their personal opinion or the sympathy for India, which has suffered such a major terrorist attack, there will always be this view that we can't let Pakistan go under, because that will give rise to an even more dangerous situation. So however much effort you may put in to a diplomatic campaign to rally international opinion against Pakistan, one should always keep in view the fact that other countries make assessments on the basis of their own interests, not on the basis of your interest. As far as intervening in Pakistan's domestic politics or its domestic economics, in my view, your capacity to do that is very limited, and it has always been very limited. In the end, Pakistanis have to decide what they want to do with their country. And I think it is for them to reach some kind of a domestic conclusion about where they want relations with India to be. Until that happens, I don't think you have the capacity to nudge them towards taking that decision.
In the aftermath of this attack, there were calls from within India. A lot of people said that now is the time to just destroy Pakistan. We should separate Balochistan entirely from Pakistan. We should obliterate Pakistan. What would be the impact of an obliterated Pakistan on India? I mean, I'm using that word in a not in the literal sense, because I don't think countries can be obliterated. But if there is a
No,
military
I think there's
aggression,
an element of wishful thinking in this, and I don't think it is in your capacity to do any of that. And so it's not a realistic kind of assessment. It's more passion than assessment, really. I think in my view, what unites hawks and doves in India is the view that somehow it is in your capacity to change Pakistan. The doves think that by holding out the hand of friendship and by investing in trade and people-to-people relationships, etc., you can change the Pakistani mind. The hawks think that you can put enough pressure, international pressure, diplomatic pressure, military pressure, economic pressure, to somehow change Pakistan. I think these two, this common view which hawks and doves have is something which we have to rethink. It's not in your capacity to change Pakistan. Only Pakistanis can change Pakistan. And till as such time as that happens, you have to deal with Pakistan as it is and not how you would like it to be. So I think most of all, we have to be very realistic and clear-eyed, because we have a very, very difficult, recalcitrant neighbor with a deeply adversarial relationship. There are no easy answers. It's the most unenviable position. And while it's easy to give advice, to handle it is very difficult. So in my view, we should be very clear-eyed about what is possible and what is not possible, and not get carried away by wishful thinking.
On that note, Mr. Raghavan, thank you very much for this insightful interview. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.